Alright, so today we're doing a rear shock and rear spring replacement on a Mark IV Volkswagen Golf. The parts that we're going to be using to replace the rear shocks and springs are some Moog coil springs, some Sachs shocks, and some KYB shock mounts. These are for the upper part of the rear shocks. Part number for the shocks. Here's part number for the shock mounts. And the part number for the rear coils. Just in case the lower bolts on your shocks are too rusty and you need some new ones, here's where you can get some new bolts for them from urotuning.com. First thing we're going to do is jack up the rear of the vehicle and put it on jack stands and take the wheels off. Jack stands go underneath the thicker part of the pinch weld at the back of the car. Alright, to take the rear shock off at the bottom, we're going to be using a 16mm wrench and a 16mm socket to get the bolt and nut off.
This lower bolt out, you can use a hammer and punch it right through. Next we're going to be undoing the upper shock mounts with two 16mm bolts.
The upper mounts off, we can take out the rear shock. Also a good idea to have a floor jack and assist you with the compression of the spring. Right, even though we have new upper mounts, we're going to be reusing these boots since they're in good shape. We have new bump stops here, but in order to get this boot off, we're going to have to take this nut off. Want to get some new bump stops? Here's the part number for the bump stops. Okay, so in order to get the old spring out, what we're doing is just using the old bolt and then pry bar on the end of it, and then prying down on that, should be able to get the spring out. Okay, so here's the new spring and the old spring. We're reusing the upper bushing from the old spring on the new spring since it's still intact. And now we can reinstall the new spring. Now that the spring's back in, we can remount the shock, starting with the upper shock mount. We've installed the new upper bushing on the old boot, and now we're reinstalling the nut on the top of the shock, and then we can reinstall the whole shock as one.
But the upper mount is in,
we can now install the lower mount. Now that the bottom bolt is back on, we can put the wheel back on, and the spring and shock job on the back is complete as soon as we do the other side. Alright, so this completes the job for the rear spring and shock installation. And next up will be the front spring or strut installation. So stay tuned for that video.